Hi, this is Frank Moore, and I'm here to talk about America, the exceptional. And I'll just give you a little bit of a bio of myself. I'm a retired lieutenant from the FDNY. Uh, I was a firsthand witness to the attacks at Ground Zero. And an important note is I was 42 at the time. So when I look at America, I have a vision of prior to 9/11 and what I see today, right? And I try to make a contrast because I think that the answer is fairly easy. And when you look and contrast America before and after 9/11, one of the most obvious things, if you're concerned about America, is the movement toward a secular society, the absence or removal of God. And so it also makes the recipe for recovery kind of simple. There's a priority and an order to things here that created the country that we enjoy and we love and are proud of. First one at the top is God. Second is family. And third is country. And notice in that hierarchy, in no place have I mentioned the word about myself. God, family, country. And I guess, that whole idea that you're not placing yourself into that mix is the original purpose that I started writing the book, America the Exceptional, because what I thought originally would kind of answer the question about why we are stagnating was because of a lack of heroism. And I think that that's kind of the part of the answer, but I think that there is courage and then there's moral courage. And I think that the moral courage comes from actually placing God before ourselves and then placing our family before ourselves. This is sacrifice. And when you think about Christianity, it's the total example of Jesus Christ in sacrifice. Right? So it's not just about God, it's actually about Jesus. And I begin every day with a few minutes of prayer. And today, I'm just going to share with you one quote from the prophet Isaiah. He said, this is God speaking. He says, I am the Lord and there is no other. I have not spoken from hiding, nor from some dark place of the earth. And I have not said to the descendants of Jacob, look for me in an empty waste. I, the Lord, promise justice. I foretell what is right. Well, I hope his justice is also merciful, because we have essentially pushed him right out of the American conversation. And the founding fathers didn't do that, right? And that's what probably is the starkest difference, that people today are looking at the founding fathers like they knew them and saying that these men were not people of moral courage. They were not people that were put God first. They were not particularly faithful religious people, and there could be nothing further from the truth. But just to give you, I'm going to start to go through my book, and that's going to be part of what the podcast is about. I'm going to start with the introduction. By the way, notice that I have my helmet from the fire department. I keep that next to me. In this podcast, it's kind of just a reminder of some of the people that I worked with. Obviously, a reminder of 9/11 and the tragedy. And 9/11 should stir up all kinds of thoughts in us. It talks about, to an American, about why we have enemies in the first place, why people in general would try to cause that kind of harm. And of course, this country is not innocent either. And but we are great, and we are great because not because of any people living in this generation or any that are coming in the future generation. It's because that we were built on a premise. So here's a little story that I began this book with. Several years ago, I visited Scranton, Pennsylvania, Memorial walls outside of a government building in downtown Scranton had been erected to honor our soldiers. They were etched with quotes from soldiers and from famous people. And one of the quotes my wife and I read as we walked from wall to wall was, "Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." Well, anybody that's watching that's a Christian probably recognizes that quote. It comes from John chapter 15, verse 13. So it's a gospel quote. But on this etched wall, shockingly, instead of crediting the words to Christ, the attribution "anonymous" was beneath the quote. And that, of course, is a lie. But more important is the fact that this is not an anonymous quote. What is the motivation for labeling an anonymous quote? What's the problem in giving credit for the words to their true author, Jesus? And so the answer to that question points us to the real problem today and why this country is stagnating, why other countries look like they're catching up with us. The remedy that you get from being a believer in Jesus Christ is that not everything rests in the power of your own two hands. You know, when I worked at Ground Zero, I think some of the frustration of firemen is that we're used to using the strength of our two hands to accomplish the mission. And maybe military people feel the same way. And when things go awry, the frustration and anxiety that accompany it can be overwhelming. And I saw two sides of that on 9/11. I saw people that, they really began to lose it, the anger and, I say that they did not contribute as much to the efforts of recovering and as some of the people that had cooler, calmer heads. Emotion is probably one of the biggest dangers, and it's also one of the things that we are engaged in daily here in the United States. Everything is emotional. Reason and rational thinking always have to be put above emotion. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was in the gulags and wrote Gulag Archipelago, talked about the removal of freedom. And he gave a speech at Harvard in 1978. And one of the things that he talked about was how the West is now lacking in moral courage. And strangely, at Harvard, he was booed for that. I don't know if maybe it hit too close to home. But I think that if you are honest and you start to take a look at the way that our leaders are working, and either emotion, fear, but that moral courage that really comes from doing the right thing is something that you have to look long and hard for, and maybe not seeing it right now in our leadership. Information today is shared at a blinding pace, which is why it can be a daunting task to try to make sense of the virtual waterfall of news thrown at us each day. One thing is certain: an exorbitant amount of energy is spent categorizing Americans, whether by race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or class, with the negative effect of pitting us against ourselves. And, one of the things is that as we move toward AI and the speed of information, and what we see is going to become less and less reliable. Because if you think about algorithms and propaganda and people that are just painting their motives so that you'll be accepted. I mean, you're creating images now that they're not real, right? And narratives are being created, and algorithms kind of push you to just watch the things that you have shown in click algorithms. That these are the things that you're interested in. and excluding other information, right? Because the whole purpose of it is just to get you to watch. So as this continues, I guess information might be, true information might be harder and harder to come by. But one thing actually doesn't change, and that's one of the things that is going to be a strength of America's comeback, is God, religion, the Bible, the Word of God, because it's unchanging. I can go to it and I can rely on the truth that comes from it. It's not going to change, right? So even in a society where truth is missing, then I can turn to it. You know, if all men are created equal, then what purpose did the categories that I mentioned serve? As the song says, united we stand, divided we fall. And most subtle is the use of the term middle class in politics and media. Americans, contrary to popular opinion, shouldn't be categorized by income. We should be recognized by what we contribute. In fact, sometimes the most valuable people among us are very often the least compensated, such as a social worker or an emergency medical technician. Our income does not thrust us into a class. We are not worth less because we earn less. No one takes a job believing they will never see a raise or a promotion. In a free society, incomes are not fixed, but fluid. We know the harder we work, the more we earn. So this is another one of the things I think that we're trying to change in today's society. We have an election in New York City where an avowed socialist is going to be running, and more than likely looks like he's going to win the mayoral. He's really a communist. And why is that dangerous? Well, the term class does have a place. Classes aptly describe the sorry state in a socialist and communist regime, where a central authority dictates what you are worth. So you have to look a little bit further down the road and be a prophet and take a look and see where things go when you adopt a communist ideology. Free people, by contrast, are only limited by themselves because they can fully utilize their unique talents. That's why it is important to recognize that true freedom is and what it is, and acknowledge why it must be defended. The other thing about communism is that while it may sound wonderful to create this image of a place where everything is distributed equally, it fails to see one important point. Somebody has to have the power to collect everything and then redistribute it. And as the philosopher Lord Acton said, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that even if you were to have a society built on that with the best of intentions, in the end, man's own corruption is going to destroy that society. And in fact, the Pilgrims, when they came over here, had a social pact quite like that, where they shared in common the things that they had. And it lasted a very short time because, of course, there were people in there whose intentions or, their temptations were such that they usurped the goods of other people and did not contribute. And so that's why while it's a little bit harsh, the free society does put first that the value of property, and that you own your property, that you work for it and produce it. What you do with it afterwards, we hope that with Christian values that you will now see charitably the need to distribute it and to help your neighbor. But to have an authority decide to do that for you is not charity on your part, for one, and it is empowering to, let's say, less than trustworthy group of people. Now, contrasting early American thought to that of today, and being objective about it, exposes two different philosophies of life. One is God-focused and the other is man-focused. The Judeo-Christian tradition, so often acknowledged in early America and discounted today, is the heart of human virtue and American exceptionalism. Moreover, a deeper look into the words of the Founding Fathers shows men soberly acknowledging divine aid in their cause, a point important to consider as we search for the source of American exceptionalism. So we often speak words, say prayers, talk about God, but do we actually look at him as working on our behalf? Do we talk to him and say, hey, he is acknowledged that he is the cause of our exceptionalism, our success, because he does prefer that we look to him. He prefers also that we see in each other him and creation and the love that he's given us, that he's actually active, and the wisdom and the genius behind the way the earth works, from the smallest cell and organism to the expanse of the universe, it all has order. So that's a conversation that's for another day. Right now I'm talking about America, but these are the things that actually we need to start to look at in the depth of our heart, to actually come up with some of the issues that we're working to correct today. All right, I'm going to continue now. Hard-working Americans have suffered the most as America loses its moorings, yet it is they who are appealed to in every political campaign. And I'd say that they're appealed to in a fear campaign. I think that most of the time when we're appealing to them, we try to scare them into thinking that one side or the other is actually going to damage what is already damaged in their financial stability. The American exceptionalism that we wish for our children depends less on democracy than it does on our loyalty to the God of our fathers. The present generation is being taught to abandon transcendent truth in favor of the oxymoron, relative truth. And those fighting that trend are under assault. From the earliest moments of recorded history, people have tried to make sense of the physical world. Living things are immediately distinguished from inert matter, with man alone possessing intellect. Our shared humanity, human life itself, should foster solidarity between us because of our shared nature. But that nature is divided into physical and spiritual components. The fact that we can disregard all that unites us as creatures, and in spite of that natural solidarity, still do harm to each other, is proof of the existence of good and evil, and clearly exposed by Judeo-Christian tradition. Mankind, seeking exceptionality in this physical world, has been led to a spiritual explanation of life and of good and evil. But it was not until God himself in the person of Jesus Christ spoke to all mankind that the whole truth was made clear concerning our solidarity, our dependence on a good God, and the existence of evil. Of all the nations that have ever existed on earth, only America has had the privilege of being born to reflect this truth. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned in an earlier show, it is unique in all of history, because while other countries, we can trace their origins, whether it be by land barriers, some kind of a geographical thing, hereditary, genetics. America is not founded that way. As a matter of fact, there is no specific genetic code that makes Americans. We kind of are made up of so many different peoples. And so that is kind of my point. We are what the Declaration of Independence says. Americans are that. People that come and they don't believe that are really, they're kind of usurpers. They're people that are, they're not going to be contributing to your freedom, and maybe worse. Only America, through its Declaration of Independence, identifies the solidarity of the human race with the will of God, her creator. So It defines the sole purpose of our country, to defend God-given liberty. No other nation is born for that purpose that is intended by God. And when you begin in the Bible with the book of Genesis, I think that you see it's almost necessary really to come to a very simplification of what we are as human beings. The first thing that we know in the book of Genesis is that God created everything. And the second thing that we know is God created us, and he created us male and female, and that he gave us the command to be fruitful and multiply and go and fill the earth. And as you go further into Genesis, he gives other commands, but that is a command, and that's where it begins. Our existence begins in that way, and that is the origin of the human family, the male and the female, and filling the world, and having children. And then it goes on further, and we are meant to instruct those children to love God. So basically everything else kind of, it transforms itself from this one fact that we are created in the image and likeness of God. I'll let you go to Genesis yourself to go find that verse. But whatever we think or know about God and his power, we reflect because we're made in his image, right? So if we're looking at a God that is completely free, then we have to realize that we're also free. If we look at God as a creator, and we also have to realize that in our small way that we also we reflect him in that we are creators. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who I mentioned before, has an interesting quote, because today we have that relative truth that I was speaking of, right? Where really there is no truth, right? Because not everything can change from day to day. It's probably the most dangerous thing that we have, and it's probably the biggest offense of God, who Jesus said was the way, the truth, and the life. It can't be a relative truth. It has to begin with an absolute truth. The absolute truth is God and everything that we know about him. So Alexander Solzhenitsyn, his quote says, "Truth eludes us if we do not concentrate with total attention on its pursuit. And even while it eludes us, the illusion still lingers of knowing it and leads to many misunderstandings. Truth eludes us if we do not concentrate with total attention on its pursuit." Well, one of the things that we're looking at today with the algorithms and propaganda and the emotional hatred of one side for another is that people are presenting their truth and trying to convince you of it. All right, and many times that it actually conflicts with any of the Christian truths that we already know. And even while it eludes us, in other words, while these other groups become successful, and you now get confused and you're not sure of what the truth is, in the end, you still somehow believe that you have come across truth and that you know it, even though you've been deceived. That's what the importance of knowing God is. Because in the end, you need to know good and evil. You need to know that Satan is the liar. You need to have a good understanding of all of the things that the gospel of Jesus Christ tells us, which is really the good news, right? Because once you know it, then you're not going to be deluded by any lie. But in order to not be deceived, you actually have to know the truth. So I think this is a good place to stop for now, and I will pick it up again in the next episode. All right. So thank you for watching, and God bless you, and God bless America.